And two things really popped in my mind as you were telling your story is number one, the importance of role models, right? For you, it was Emily. And for me personally, it was Kalpana Chawla. She was an astronaut who unfortunately died with the Challenger explosion in 2003. But as a child, when I saw that on the screen, I thought, you know what? That's who I want to be, right? I did study mechanical engineering. I didn't really go all the way into aeronautics, obviously, but that's precisely the importance of representation, right? When you see it, you think you can be it, and then you work towards it, right? So that's one thing. The other thing that came to mind is, and it kind of made me sad, because when you said you were one of the 3 women in the class of civil engineering, it kind of made me sad because not a lot has changed, because I'm going back to my university days, right? When I went to school, I was one of the 7, right? So from your time to my time, the count had increased to 4 more bodies. But for you, it was a class of 100. For me, it was a class of probably 100, 130, or it was a larger class, right? So it's a little disheartening. We're getting better, and there's so much, we have done so much better since even I have been in school. But that's the thing, right? We're moving the needle. We have to push the needle, and not just for women in general. When we think about women in STEM, I think we also miss the intersectionality of women in STEM, right? Because I was not just one of 7 women, I was also one of 2 women of color, and not many people really look at it from that perspective. So that's why it's so important to have diverse representation, right? Different kinds of representation within our community. So thank you so much for sharing that. Now, Rumina, you are a champion of equity, diversity, and inclusion, not just in the nuclear energy sector, but really for overall, for all of STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. You had mentioned once in a LinkedIn article of yours of being the one and only, and how you've had to fight for everything you have achieved. Could you tell me some of the structural and cultural barriers that you had faced in the day, and how you had overcome them to be where you are today?
So let me start off with my earliest childhood memory, and I think you and many of your audience may be able to relate to it. I as I mentioned, I'm from a South Asian family. My forefathers are from India, and one of my earliest childhood memories is I'm number 3 or 4 girls in our family. Is when my mother was pregnant with the 4th child. My paternal grandmother was asking, suggesting that I pray for a brother, that a brother would be great because I'd have someone who'd take care of me and look after me, when I grew up and so on.
And carry the family name, right?
Yeah, well, yeah. Though hers is more selfish. It's really for you that I'm suggesting that you have a brother. And I remember praying, I don't want a brother. Please let it be another sister, because I had seen in our extended families how brothers got preferential treatment, how the sons were just seen to be a bit extra special. And I certainly didn't want to be a second-class citizen in my own family. And lo and behold, my prayers got answered, and have another sister. But when you talk about cultural barriers, it started from a very young age, that there's certain roles for girls and certain expectations for boys. And so then fast forward, I told you I picked engineering not because I was aware of any gender differences, but it was very clear. And I don't know, Amreen, where you went to school, but I went to U of T. Civil engineering was in the Galbraith building, 4-story building, 1 women's washroom in that 4-story building, right? And there were, I was in the civil engineering program, but there were other programs. And so, if you've seen the movie Hidden Figures, and yes, women have to run to washrooms, well, guess what we had to do between each period is to run up to the washroom, because there's only one, because that has changed. But I'll pick on the washroom and the change room scene, because to me, it shows how we've evolved, right? So when I started university, there was just the one washroom in this building. And then when I started working at Ontario Power Generation at the time, and I was working at a nuclear facility at the Pickering Nuclear Generating Station, that plant was built never expecting that there'd be women working there. So they had no change room facilities for women, and it was kind of a makeshift one. As one of the first nuclear energy workers to work in Canada, and to try to accommodate that. And same with the personal protective equipment that just were designed for women. There's pornography spread out all over the facility, and I explained that to my daughter. She can't believe that, that was the reality, but that indeed was the reality. And so I think there's cultural barriers. Let me give you a couple of examples, not so much from my time, but just to show that they still exist. I have a colleague of mine whose granddaughter, I just come from school in junior kindergarten, and he was telling me, this is not too long ago, that she'd come back with coloring that she had done, and she was showing it to him, but she didn't look terribly happy about it. And he said, "Well, you've done such a great job. It was of a clown." And she says, "Yeah, but I really wanted the robot, but the teacher said the robots were for boys and the girls got clowns." And so those still exist, right? That the
Yes.
robots boys now. We moved from dolls to clowns, so I guess maybe that's progress. But it's instilled in us, right? That there are these specific roles. But while there is progress, and I agree with you, I think it's very slow. I think it's like 22% of graduating students are women in engineering now. So it's moved, but not moved fast enough. But as part of my role as the regulator, it was a year ago, maybe just a bit over a year ago, I had a young woman from working at one of our uranium mines, intervene and come in front of the commission. And she's talking about what great opportunities her employer had provided her and how she had progressed to doing different things. And she was actually operating equipment, boring tunnels. First woman, probably the only one in the world doing that. And really proud and a great role model, an Indigenous young woman. And so I asked her, I said, if there was one thing your employer could do for you to make your work environment more conducive, what would it be? And she said, well, funny you should ask me that. My manager asked me that very same question last week. Do you know what I told him? A women's washroom underground would be kind of nice.
Wow.
I thought, oh my gosh, 40 years later, and we're still fighting for change rooms and washrooms. But here's what's different. One was her manager actually asked to see how I can make your workplace better. And the second thing was that I actually got a message right after from her employer saying, we're building that washroom. And this year it was actually in service. So the acceptance that we need to have these in place, we need to ask, we need to listen. And so that's what gives me hope. But if talking about other structural barriers, I think we know that there are systemic biases, institutional barriers that exist, and some is unconscious, right? It's not deliberately done, but those exist. But I find that there is a growing awareness that something needs to happen, and certainly in the federal government where I'm at, there are very, very many positive initiatives, and one that I'm particularly proud of that I kind of showcase internationally is our GBA Plus, is our Gender-Based Analysis Plus tool that is used to assess all our policies, our programs, our initiatives with that lens that have really looked at the kind of impact this is having on women. And the plus is that it's not just on gender, it is on all those other ones, whether it's race or whether it's sexuality, etc. And I think that really helps identify where those barriers are and then help address them. So those are just some that I've encountered, some that still exist. And fortunately, I'm now in a position where I can actually drive change in addressing some of those.